Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA Podcast. I am your host, Sherrod Blakely, and I'm joined today by the one and only Noa Dalzell of SB Nation, as well as the You Got Boston podcast here, which you can see on the CLNS Media Network. Noa, how are you doing, Noa?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Good to have you here. I know that the summertime is a little bit different this year, covering the Celtics. We're used to kind of ratcheting up the machine for another run at a championship. Not quite the story narrative this offseason. Lots of question marks, certainly, about the Celtics and what they are going to do this year. And we're going to get into some of that. But before we get too deep into things, I just want to make sure our listeners know that this is the Big Three NBA podcast, and also to show some love to one of our good friends, Prize Picks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and get a $50 bonus after your first $5 lineup. And as a friendly reminder, again, this is the Big Three NBA podcast, part of the CLNS Media Network, which is where you'll find lots of great Big Three NBA podcast content, as well as content from our guests, Noa Dalzell, who does great work with the You Got Boston podcast. And Noa, one of the big question marks for the Celtics this season is the big man position. And we've got lots of questions, and we don't see a whole lot of answers, but we may have stumbled upon a potential answer-esque to the question of who's going to be the guy. Neemias Queta, playing for Portugal, EuroBasket, had a truly dominant performance in their win over I'm going to screw this up. I'm not going to screw it up. Czechia. I'm really bad at foreign country pronunciations, but he had 23 points, 18 rebounds, 4 blocks. And there's some research done afterward where he was, I guess, the first player since they began tracking the rebound stats to tally 20 plus points and 15 plus rebounds in their first Euro basketball game. And his 18 rebounds was the most by a player in their EuroBasket debut. Lots of praise for the job that he did. And certainly if you're the Celtics, you're really feeling good about what he was able to do. Granted, the competition wasn't the likes of which he's going to see, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But what were your overall impressions of just his inaugural game with EuroBasket?
Yeah, he looked incredible. Like, he really did. And, part of it is I do think that his play style, suits Europe better because he was able to kind of hang out by the rim, the physicality. I don't think, I was just watching Nikola Vucevic and Jonas Valanciunas, and they both are superstars in EuroBasket. And so I think there's a little bit of a disclaimer that this isn't the NBA. That being said, I also watched Porzingis a couple hours later and he really struggled. And so there is a level of physicality that I think Queta has shown that he brings in the NBA, a level of rebounding prowess that we have seen on the Celtics. And we kind of got a glimpse of what that looks like when he plays 30 minutes in a game. And when we discuss the potential range of outcomes for Boston next year, I think he's the biggest X factor of if he becomes a more than serviceable starting center who can give you, 15 rebounds on a given night or 12 rebounds on a given night, which I think is possible, then this team might not be heading towards the doomsday projections that many people have them going towards. So it was really encouraging. By the time this podcast comes out, he will have also played Nikola Jokic in Serbia. So I'm curious to see how that goes, because obviously that's a much bigger defensive challenge than he had in his debut. And he's also going to play Porzingis this weekend. So a lot of other matchups coming up in the coming days here that are going to give us a better sense of where he's at against, various NBA centers.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this is kind of like the ghost of Queta's past and future when you look at, playing against Porzingis and also playing against Jokic. And that's, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Jokic because at the time of this taping, they will be playing shortly after we play. So we won't have a deep dive conversation about that. But going into that game, though, what's a realistic expectation for Queta, for Celtics fans, playing against, arguably is one of the greatest big men to ever play in the NBA? What should we realistically expect to see from Queta in that matchup?
The thing with Jokic is there's no stopping him. There's not even really slowing him down, to be honest. So he's defensively, it's gonna be an enormous challenge. But it's can he hold his own as well as anybody else? Like, is he going to be like if Jokic is absolutely exploiting him? Like, it's not a great sign, but I'm not going to take too much from this game one way or another because it's Jokic. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to face Sengun later on. He's going to face Porzingis. Like, those are the kinds of matchups that I'm like, okay, let's see what kind of impact he can make. With Jokic, I don't know. There's nobody that can really guard him in the NBA or in the world. And so, if he can be impactful still and rebound well, Jokic is a great rebounder. I think it's one of the underrated skills about him. That's probably Keita's biggest strength as well. So curious to see like how the rebounding battle ends up going. Serbia is probably the best team at EuroBasket, so I'm also curious from Portugal's standpoint because I'm a Portugal fan for this summer, like how they can hold their own against a higher level opponent than their opener matchup. But I'm not gonna like overreact to how he deals with Jokic because ultimately, like it's not like anybody out there is gonna make Jokic look limited.
Yeah, yeah. Jokic is truly he's the cheat code that no one has figured out how to cheat against.
Yeah.
He does everything you could possibly want, and he does it in just a very kind of low-key, subliminal way. It's almost like he slow drips dominates you. He doesn't go out there and score 50 points or playing above the rim. He just plays fundamental basketball, breaks you down. If you sleep or nod or blink, he's going to make you pay for that with his just overall game, whether it's scoring, rebounding. I guess for me, the thing that I'm looking for from Queta is just to compete. I mean,
Yeah.
just show that you're not going to back down from this guy. And yes, he's going to more likely than not outplay you. But are you competing? Are you allowing yourself the things that you do well to shine? Even though obviously Jokic shines a little bit brighter than most players at pretty much all the facets of being a big man. So I would love to see Kata just compete, and that's the one thing about with him, and we've seen this, Noah, with him in Boston. Competing and consistency seem to be the two things that if he ever got to the point where those two things became almost like part of who he was, you're feeling really good about his future in a Boston Celtics uniform. So I'm with you on as far as like not putting too much stock into it, but I would definitely love to see him compete at a relatively high level against a guy that is the best, not only in Euro basketball, but also in the NBA and let's be honest, in the world, and one of the all-time greats. And Keita, again, you're not Jokic, but damn it, you should be able to compete with him, and that's what we're hoping for. Uh,
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and
And no, go ahead.
no, you got it.
I was just gonna say it's just, I think there's a level of like fans are a little bit down on Keita because you think, he's been buried in the rotation the last 2 seasons. But when you really think about who he was playing behind, like Al Horford, Luke Cornett, who had an awesome season, obviously, and signed a big contract after, and Porzingis, who was averaging 20 points per game and shooting 40% from three. Like it wasn't an indictment on like what he's capable of. It was more of like this was it was almost like a paid and purchase situation from a few years ago where it's like he's playing behind three NBA starting level guards. And so, where are the minutes for him? So I think he could have a kind of leap that really surprises people. And Eurobasket is not the perfect indicator of that, but there's a couple of indicators. He's been awesome in the G League. He has been awesome in stretches on the NBA court as well. He just hasn't had so many opportunities to play through mistakes and things like that.
Yeah, and you had mentioned, his play in the G League. He really has shown the promise and potential to be a good NBA player based on what he's done in the G League. And I'm just curious, as someone who I know you watch a ton of G League games, where have you seen his game grow the most during that period of time when he was playing a little bit more regularly in the G League?
Yeah, I mean, he was I think he was one of the top defenders in the G League at all times when he was on the floor. And a lot of times when you watch G League games, even like a JD Davison type who was an MVP last year, like there are certain times where it's like, okay, this guy just doesn't belong on this court. Like he
Right.
just doesn't belong. Like he's just at a different level of play. And Keita was probably the best example of that of any guy I've watched play in the G League over the last few years. Whereas just he'd be on the floor, he just his physicality, just his rim protection, like he just was moving differently than the other centers in the G League.
Right.
And so specific areas of growth, like I do think his timing defensively, like fouling has been a big issue for him in the past. And that's an area where I think he's really improved. Even in this game the other day, like I think he had like one or two fouls against the Czech Republic. So that's an area where you could see a market improvement throughout his G League tenure, that he was actually protecting the rim and doing that, but like it can't always be going for a block because you go for a block every single time, you're probably going to foul out of games. And I thought that's another area where he had great growth defensively in the opener for EuroBasket is that he was deterring players from taking certain shots. He was altering shots, but that he wasn't actually going in for a block every single time because it's just too risky. You see guys like Jaren Jackson Jr., who was a defensive player of the year, but can't stay on the floor a lot of times because he's in foul trouble. Like that's an area where he's going to have to continue to grow because they are going to need him. It's one thing if he comes in for 10 minutes and picks up 3 fouls, but if he's going to play 30 minutes, that can't happen.
Yeah, and I often wonder with guys like him, finding that balance between still being aggressive and things like that nature, but not fouling. Because
Yeah.
sometimes players, and we've seen some guys do this, where they do a complete 180, where they go from fouling all the time to not playing defense all the time because they're afraid to pick up a foul. Which, as we know, that's going to get you a seat next. That gets your first class seat next to Joe Mazzulla really quick. If you do a little bit too much of that, if you're Queta, for sure. Um, Before we go any further, just a reminder that this is the Big 3 NBA podcast, which is part of the CLNS Media Network. This is where you'll find the Big 3 NBA podcast, past and present, as well as other great Celtics content. And also, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our good friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, which again is the best place to win cash while watching sports and joining millions of users. And sign up today. You can mix and match your player projections for different sports like women's basketball, soccer, esports, you name it. Prize Picks has you covered. How do you get in? It's super simple. You just download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, you download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And touched on in our Prize Picks promo, one of the sports that they deal with, which is women's basketball. And that has become a topic of discussion around these parts a little bit more so than past years, just because of former Celtics owner Steve Pagliuca's quest to purchase the Connecticut Sun, and how the WNBA was kind of pulled the lead course, so not so fast, my friend, and kind of put the kibosh of sorts into that. And Noah, as someone who I know covers the WNBA extensively, what's your take on all this? Because there's a lot of different voices who are chiming in as far as should this happen, should this not happen? And as someone who's a regular observer, what's your take on what's happening with the Connecticut Sun and the quest to bring them to Boston?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this because the Mohegan Sun tribe has reportedly agreed to sell the team to Steve Pagliuca, which would involve a move to Boston. And reportedly, the league does not want that. And they want Boston to have to wait in line and apply for an expansion bid like everybody else. And the next round would be in 2033. And so, in turn, there's 2 other options for where this Connecticut Sun franchise could go. One is there's a bid in Hartford, which reportedly is financially comparable to Steve Pagliuca's bid, which is a $325 million bid plus $100 million for a practice facility. And then there's a group in Houston that has been trying to bring a team back for a long time. Houston, obviously, a very storied WNBA city. And the league reportedly prefers the Houston bid. The problem with that to me is that I don't think the league should pick a winner when it comes to a sale, especially when that creates the scenario now where there wouldn't be a team in New England for the next 6 years. The Mohegan Sun tribe cares about there being basketball in New England. They care about there being basketball in Connecticut. There's a long storied tradition of indigenous culture. Like that's a big part of this organization. And it's very unique that it's owned by an indigenous tribe. Like I don't know that NBA fans can conceptualize like how different that is than a lot of the ownership groups that we see across the league today. And it doesn't seem like the league wants them to make that decision. And, the Hartford bid to me is fair too. Like if they end up selling to Hartford, keeping the team in Connecticut, like that should be their choice. And is it the best market from a financial standpoint? Like I wouldn't pick Hartford, no, but it's better than Mohegan Sun. And that's where this team has been for a long time. So I just don't think it's right that the WNBA can come in and force a sale to an NBA ownership group. And it does kind of feel like the way expansion is going, that the league wants NBA owners to be the ones that own the corresponding WNBA team, which I understand the NBA and the WNBA are one business. So I understand why that is. But it's just not the way the WNBA has been to date. And some of the best ownership groups, the Las Vegas Aces, the Seattle Storm, the first groups that have had practice facilities for their players were not NBA owners. Like these are independent owners that are not a part of the NBA. And so like even their initial statement, they said, Bill Chisholm has expressed interest in buying Boston-based WNBA team. To me, it's kind of like that sucks for him. But like he didn't get this one. He could have been involved in this bid. I don't think that the league can prevent the sale because they want it to be Bill owning both the Celtics and the Boston-based WNBA team. So I think it starts a conversation around like how much control does the league have? Obviously, I'm a little biased. I'd love to see a team in Boston, but at the same time, I've gotten to know the Connecticut Sun fans because I was on their beat last year, and I don't think it's fair to force them to not have a team to root for 6 years, even though their existing ownership group found a suitor, eligible purchaser that keeps the team in New England and potentially has games in Rhode Island and Connecticut as well. So I don't like the sound of it. A lot of it is reports and conflicting things coming out. So we'll see kind of what actually happens. But right now, the idea of them being forced to go to Houston seems a little bit unfair for New England basketball, especially for the Tribe, who did not make that decision.
And frankly, when you're talking about the WNBA and just how it is expanding in terms of not only in terms of teams, but also in terms of its appeal, Boston just made so much sense. You've got a championship culture. You would be in a city that has won more NBA titles than any other franchise in NBA history. You have an ownership group who is familiar with being part of a championship culture. He was a co-owner of the 18-time NBA champion Boston Celtics. To me, the thing that really struck me is kind of odd that they pushed back on this was when he not only offered more money than you would be getting for an expansion team, but then he tacked on another 9-figure $100 million for a practice facility. So now it's like he has given you basically above market value if this were an expansion team, and he's topping that with a practice facility, funds for that as well. It just, it felt as though, and again, this is from someone who's watching this from afar, it felt like the league got in their feelings on this and felt as though the Tribe should have came to them and kissed the ring first before they went out and actually found them a deal that, if we're being honest and transparent, the WNBA could not have found that deal, because if they could have found that type of deal, they would have presented that to the Tribe already.
Right.
So it feels icky that all the things that would be in place for this franchise to move into a better situation and still have a clear and undeniable growth potential might be squashed away because the league got in their feelings because the Tribe did not kiss the ring before they actually went out and got a better deal.
And part of it is also the league getting in their feelings about Boston not submitting a bid for an expansion team. But I've talked to people that have been interested in bringing a team to Boston, and they were like, why would we apply for an expansion bid when there was a team in our media market? Like Connecticut Sun games are streamed on NBC Sports Boston, right? So it was always a thought of when Connecticut is up for sale, which I think people knew was coming for a long time now. That's going to be our opportunity to bring a team to Boston. We're not going to win the bid when there are parts of the country that have no team at all, and we're competing with that to try to have a team in Connecticut and in Boston. It's just, it doesn't, I think that's pretty logical. And so that being the reason that the league keeps pointing to feels a little bit like a crutch more than like an actual legitimate explanation for why they're opposed to this. I think the reason they're opposed to this, and this is just speculation, is that they just want the same ownership group for both teams, and they want to also be able to have Boston be a very expensive expansion team in 2033. Who knows what the expansion ticket price will be then, but obviously Boston's going to be able to find somebody that wants it. So most of the big media markets now already have a team or have plans for a team that are committed. So Boston's one of like the clear ones that they know they can hinge upon like in 7 years, but it just doesn't seem like a fair explanation. So we'll see how things shake up. I think there's still a lot of different ways this could go. But I'm closely monitoring the story because it would be really nice, I think. And I think that the city is ready for a team, and the timing could actually be good if the Celtics are struggling a little bit to have a renewed like infusion of a basketball team to root for.
Exactly. And that, to me, that's the wild card in all this is just the timing of it. It just seems like if you're going to allow a team to make this type of pivot in this market, this is the time. The Red Sox, they're doing some things, but they're by no means at the top of the mountaintop in Major League Baseball. The Celtics are kind of in this retooling, rebuilding-esque stage. And for a WNBA team, one that already has a built-in fan base in this market, the time to move them would be right now, and knowing that they'd be moving to a market that has the potential to be even grander than it is right now currently. So and again, as someone who has followed the WNBA going all the way back to when they were the Detroit, there was a Detroit Shock team that won a couple of titles. When they left, it was very difficult for that market to frankly rekindle that type of fan base for the WNBA. And I do worry that if there's no WNBA team in New England, as much as we love UConn basketball, I think folks want more. And I think folks, now that they've had a taste of basketball beyond just like one or two powerful college teams, they want to keep that. And if it goes away, you know how it is here in Boston. There's another sport that's willing to fill that gap just like that. And so I worry that if, let's say, they were to bring an expansion team years down the road, how much of a challenge would that franchise have in just rekindling that energy that exists right now in the WNBA? If, let's say, they've got to wait 5-6 years before they can get another team. So,
Right. I think that's exactly the question. Like right now, it's a great time to like trying to jump on the bandwagon. But the sale price, the high ticket price for like an expansion team in 7 years might not be as high as the league thinks. Like we don't know.
right.
So we'll see. But I think it's still possible that the team comes to Boston. I don't think it's ruled out. But and honestly, I'd be okay with like the Boston or the Hartford bid. I think those are both fair options because ultimately it's like the tribe is the one that's selling, and if those are the bids they're considering, I think those are both fair outcomes. I just don't think it's fair, and I'd love to see a team in Houston for the record, but I don't think it's fair to force a sale to like a completely different part of the country and then not have a team in New England for such a long time. It's such a peak moment for women's basketball.
Right. And again, just we're going to shift back to the Celtics for a minute. And we were talking a bit earlier about just the G League and specifically Queta through that. But really, it's not like he would be the first success story to come through the Celtics G League system. And as someone who I know has followed that closer than anyone, what have you discovered are some of the keys to guys who kind of go through that system and come out on the other end able to contribute? Guys like Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard spent some time down there. What's the key to guys making it through their system and being able to compete and play at that next level?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. You have to have the right mindset of kind of not feeling like you're above where you're at. Like I think Lou Cornett is one of the best examples of this. Of when in games where he hasn't played, he doesn't have this like burning feeling like he's better than everybody else and why is, he's getting screwed over. And he's talked about it openly. Like there were moments even last season where he was out of the rotation for a second and he never kind of built that resentment or that anxiety of like, I have to be out there. And it's just a mindset. And some guys have it and some guys don't. And, I don't know Queta like super personally well, but from everything I've heard him say and from what I've heard from people around him, like he kind of has that ability to he didn't have to sign with the Celtics again, or, he didn't have to he could have last year been a little bit unhappy with the fact that he fell out of the rotation, even at times where he had like a really good game and then didn't really get an opportunity the next one. Like there was a game against Indiana where he was like the reason they came back from a big deficit, pushed it to overtime, and then like the next couple of games he barely plays. And that's happened to him a bunch with the Celtics. And some guys can handle that and some guys can't. And I think that he's one of the guys that can. The other thing is that he is a guy that started playing basketball really late, and his story is a pretty fascinating one. Like his sister was going to basketball practice, he was just there shooting around. Everybody in Portugal saw him there, and they were like, "He's massive and like could be an NBA, could be a basketball player." And so that's always a good indicator as well. Like when you're a little bit later, and you're a later bloomer, then your ceiling is also potentially higher. So I think Queta has like all the makings of a potential like G League to NBA success story. But he's going to have to stay healthy. He's going to have to fix the little things that he has struggled with. Like I think there's some defensive issues that he has in more complicated NBA schemes that maybe aren't as applicable in the G League or in EuroBasket. But if he can figure that out, like he has a lob threat, he can finish much better around the rim than he used to. He used to bring the ball down. He doesn't really do that as much anymore. So there's little things that he's really kind of fixed that have been issues and kind of held him back. And so I think all the tides are like everything's kind of aligning for him to be a very surprisingly impactful player next season. So we'll see if it happens, but I wouldn't be shocked if he averages, 12 and 12 next year and becomes like a really solid NBA caliber center.
I am with you on that. The one thing that, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think it's the wild card of all wild cards when it comes to G League success stories, and it's an opportunity. Will this
Yeah.
guy get an opportunity? And Queta certainly, when you look with no Al Horford likely to come back, Luke Cornett is gone. And the cupboard is pretty damn bare. And the guys that he'll be competing with are guys that, if we're being very transparent, he should be able to outperform. Based on his size, based on the upside that he brings. But with that opportunity, he's not the only one on the Celtics roster who's kind of gone through the G League system, who's probably going to get an opportunity to play a bigger role. And I wanted to talk to you about two guys in particular who are kind of in the middle of that G League development cycle. And I'm thinking specifically about Jordan Walsh and Baylor Shireman. Two guys who we have seen, we have seen flashes of really, really good play. We've seen what I call the Casper the Friendly Ghost disappearing act, where you're like, where did they go? I could have sworn I saw them out there, and they're gone just like that. And I'm just curious, Noah, from your perspective, with those two guys, they're each going to get some opportunities this year. I don't think there's any question. Who do you think over the course of the season is going to be able to be the bigger contributor in turn, and just overall, not just in like a spurt here or there, but just when you look at each of their seasons in its totality? Who do you think will have given more to the Celtics?
I lean Baylor. It's tough. They were both drafted like in a similar range. Baylor obviously is a lot older, and Jordan had a better summer league. Baylor had more flashes last season, so they each have like a couple things going their way. But I think ultimately they're going to need scoring this season more than they have in previous years. Like in the past, they really just needed somebody out there that can like defend and rebound, potentially just like eat some of those minutes. But I think they're going to need scoring more, and I still think I have a higher confidence level in Baylor's ability to score than Jordan's, even though Jordan was a better scorer at summer league. Baylor's also just like, I think there's certain aspects of his game that are more advanced. He can be a little bit of a playmaker on the floor as well. They might need that because you don't have like Jason Tatum playing point forward. You don't have like some of the other guys that they've run the offense through. So I could even see if things go well for Baylor that he has stretches where they're actually playing through him on the floor, depending on who's out there. So his ceiling just seems higher to me. Jordan, I feel like, is more of a sure thing. Like he's gonna probably play, 10 or so minutes a game and guard the opposing teams forward for a bit and hustle and kind of give them energy. And what we saw from him last year when they were down a few players earlier on, where he was in the rotation and he was playing, but he was putting up like no stats because he wasn't really shooting. He wasn't really doing a whole lot. He was just kind of out there to eat those minutes. And I can see that happening again, maybe to a little bit of a higher extent. If he's shooting the ball better, that'll help them too. But Baylor just still has the higher ceiling. And I think about like how Baylor looked like towards the end of last year. He really looked like an NBA player. And so there's aspects of his game where he's a little bit slower. Jordan's a little bit more athletic. Defensively, Jordan has the edge. But I think where Baylor's ceiling is just higher, and I am a believer in his offensive game. So I think it's going to come together, and people are going to kind of look back at his summer league struggles, and it's going to feel like more of an outlier than kind of who he actually is.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. The thing that when I look at both of those guys, I figure that each of them has like that one thing that they do well. Like Baylor, I think he's a better shot maker than Jordan. And Jordan, I just think, is a better athlete. To me, that's like the main course, the entree. But to me, Baylor has more side dishes to his game. Like Baylor, if he's not scoring, he still can rebound and pass. And I think he does those little things that when you're checking down, when you have your checklist of things that you need to do to win, Baylor, I think, gives you an opportunity to do more of those things when his main thing isn't going his way. If Jordan, and with athleticism, there are nights where it's going to be, he's not going to be the more athletic matchup. And when you're playing maybe 5-10 minutes a game, if you don't have one discernible skill that gives you an advantage when you're on the floor, then you're just basically running out the clock. You're just trying to keep things as they are. And I think that for this team to have a season above and beyond expectations, they're going to need game changers. They're going to need guys who can be difference makers, guys that can do certain things that go above and beyond whatever it is, the main thing that they're supposed to do out there. Baylor, I've been incredibly shocked at his playmaking ability. He's a much better playmaker than I thought he would be. And he's a guy that can rebound a lot. The one thing that he does, and I think this is one of those things that he's got to get better at, is his defense. I think part of his problem defensively is that he hasn't quite figured out how to use the level of athleticism that he has in the right way in order to be effective. For example, I don't know of a player who has tried to draw more charges and gets called for the blocking foul than Baylor. It seems like every time he's trying to do the right thing. And you love the fact that he's trying to do the right thing and make the right play. But I would say 9 out of 10 times when that call is made against him, it's obviously the right call. He just doesn't get there in time. And he's got to figure out how to, use his basketball IQ a little bit better in the areas that he's not strong in, like defense. He's a smart player offensively. He's going to figure that out, what he needs to do. But it's his defense needs to be a little bit better, a little bit more solid. But when we talk about opportunities and we talk about, the G League system, the Celtics have 3 two-way players as well. And you got to figure at some point they'll get some inkling of an opportunity, whether it's in training camp, whether it's preseason, maybe spot duty here and there during the season. But when you look at RJ Lewis, you look at Max Shulga, and Amari Williams, of those 3, who do you think has the best shot of helping the Celtics this year above and beyond just, an occasional G League call up?
Probably none of them, to be honest. Like, I don't think any of them are gonna really see many minutes in Boston. Um, but if I had to pick one,
It's tough because I'm with you.
yeah, it's tough. Like Amari Williams, I would have picked heading into summer league. And again, I'm like really not somebody that overreacts to summer league, but he just looked pretty raw. And I think he's gonna need a lot of time in Maine. And I don't see him, especially now that they've signed Chris Boucher, like there's a little bit more depth in the front court than there was
Right.
a couple weeks back. Maybe still him, just because like if a couple guys go down in the front court, like you do need a big presence there, and he is that. Um, yeah, I guess I lean him, but, like, very tentatively. Like, there's not one of those 3 guys right now that I'm, like, super high on. RJ Lewis, obviously, we haven't seen him play at summer league. He was a late addition acquired earlier this month, but I think he's probably the most reliable bucket getter of the 3, but is that really what they're gonna be prioritizing right now? Probably not. Uh, Maybe Max Shulga too, there's a case to be made that he's somebody that just looks like he could come in and, like, I view him as more somebody that could come in and maybe eat those minutes.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would be surprised if any of those 3 guys actually gets more than a couple of games in Boston this season. Even though they're
Yeah.
in a rebuilding or retooling year, whatever you want to call it, and even though there are more opportunities than in years past, I would still be surprised if those 3 guys, because there's still like Ugo and Jordan and those guys that I'm still not sure where they fall. So you're gonna have to go kind of below that. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. You know what? As painful as it is for me to go here, there's something about Max Shula that I like. I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, maybe I don't know what it is, but there's something about him that gives me this incredibly just um I have no receipts to back up this feeling that he's going to be a decent player. I have literally nothing to go on other than the fact that there's something about him when he's on the floor that I like. And I don't know what it is. It's just a kind of a gut feeling thing. Is he going to be a rotation guy? Hell no. He might not even be a rotation guy in the G League, but I do think that if he gets an opportunity, I think he's going to max it out. No pun intended. I think he's going to make the most of that opportunity because I can't tell you why. He's just one of those guys that I just have this gut feeling that when he gets a chance to play, he's going to make the most of that. And to me, if you're going to have a team that is predicted to be where the Celtics are, and you somehow managed to exceed that, you're going to need a guy like that. You're going to need someone who comes literally out of nowhere to be a significantly better player than most anyone thought. I look back at when I was like years ago when I covered the Detroit Pistons, and they traded for this guy named Ben Wallace, who was this undersized center who couldn't score, but he was a pretty good rebounder. And little did they know that they had a future Hall of Famer who was just an absolute terror, could literally defend 1 through 5 on a level that very few have been able to do before or since. And now, is Max going to be that good? I don't think so. But could he become someone that could be a contributor? Absolutely. But again, I have nothing to go on other than a gut feeling that of those of the two-way guys, I think he might be the one to break through. So
It is
we will
interesting. They have
find.
a brand new cast for two-way players. last couple of years there were a lot of holdovers, so it's a completely new group. And there's some other guys in Maine that are also interesting that are not on two-way contracts that could potentially fight for those spots too.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with those guys because what we've seen, and you've seen this more so than I have, they pretty much locked in on their two-way guys, and
Yeah.
basically the players that they have, they're developing. It feels like a little bit more so than just the guys who just happen to be on the main Celtics roster. It'll be interesting to see if they will kind of flip the script a little bit because there have been a couple years where you're looking at the box score and I'm watching the game, and there's some guys that you're like, why is he not getting even the slightest hint of getting the call up?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that this year, for sure. For sure. Well, listen, before we get out of here, for those of you listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the CLNS Media and Celtics All Access YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Celtics content. And one more thing, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you'll know the instant a new video drops like this one. For Noa Dalzell of SB Nation and the You Got Boston podcast. Check it out. It is also on the CLNS Media Network. Lots of great content. Love the interview you had with Peyton Pritchard. I checked that out. That is a must-see, folks, as well as the discourse that you have on our good friend Nemius Queta. Good stuff as always. For Noah, this is Sherrod Blakely, and this is the Big Three NBA Podcast.